I'm Rebekah Ricks, and I'm here at the Homeschool Connection in Winter Haven, Florida, and I am talking a little bit about our show here called The Brew. And a brew is a mixture of people, events, and things that come together to make a more potent whole, and we sure hope that we get to come together with you and collaborate with you and make a better whole for you. And so today, I have my Texas cup. My parents live in Texas. I'm originally from Oklahoma, and this is like a 3-cupper. And I need a 3-cupper today because this week I'm actually out at our church's teen camp, and it is a for real camp. Like we live in Central Florida, so it's Florida where there's no AC in the cabins, and you have to hike to the bathroom, and the mattresses are foam. I mean, it's pretty rough in it, but I love it. There's nothing better than spending a week out at camp. Nothing better for teenagers. But I came in this morning into the office. It's not too bad of a drive for us from there to come in and do our live broadcast this morning. So if I'm drinking a little coffee, that's why. I actually was up to like 3 in the morning because I have 9th and 10th grade girls, and I found out that if on the first night you wear them out, then they don't want to stay up so late every other night. So we stayed up super late. And of course, I enjoy every minute of it. It's so much fun. If you have not spent time at teen camp, you need to go. It is quite an experience. And I thoroughly enjoy it. It's one of my favorite things in the whole world. So I might need a little more of a brew here. But we are going to talk a little bit today about fractions, how to get traction with fractions. Okay, so this time I'm going to talk to you really the reason to start with that I feel like from working with tons and tons of kids. So this is my 16th year of teaching, and I have taught 6th grade, and then I taught 3rd grade, and then I team taught 5th and 6th grade in middle school and high school math. So I've taught a little bit of everything. And everybody I know, everyone I know, most kids struggle with fractions. The biggest thing I hate is when we have high schoolers come in for Algebra 1 and they can do everything but the problems that have fractions in them. There's just something about fractions that makes people scares them. It scares kids. I don't know, they feel very intimidated by fractions. So here's a few reasons why I think people are intimidated. The first reason is we start teaching fractions when they don't know their multiplication tables well. So if you don't know your multiplication tables well, fractions are based on that. The number one thing is make sure that you know your multiplication tables really, really well. Because fractions are based on that, and sometimes we try to move them through into fractions and they're not ready because they don't know their multiplication tables yet. The second reason I think sometimes we fail at fractions is repetition. Repetition is the key to learning, especially in these younger grades. So we're thinking 1st grade is going to be addition, 2nd grade is subtraction, 3rd grade is multiplication and division, and 4th grade is your big fraction year. So you might hit 4 fractions in 4th and 5th and 6th grade, but if those kiddos really need the repetition, and so most children, most of them hate doing the repetition of doing it over and over again. But the only way you're going to learn something is if you do repetition, especially in math. So one of the main things is to do it at least 30 times. Okay, so you have to do one type of problem 30 times to know it. And I do kind of have a problem with some of these math programs that don't have enough practice problems when you learn the concept. So there's 2 basic ideas for learning math. There's what's called building blocks, and there's what's called a spiral review. Okay, so the best kind would be to mix building blocks and a spiral review. So a great example would be Saxon is huge on their spiral review. But when they learn a new concept, you're only doing that problem like 6, 8, 10 times. So the new concept is only done a few times, and then they have this long spiral review. And the spiral review is great. We need that spiral review. But if they don't have what's called a building blocks, is when we teach math and you have them do the same problem like 30 times. So a lot of times you'll see it, usually old algebra books or older math books, you'll see that when you look in there. Why is there 50 problems of this one type? Well, because repetition is the key to learning. But then we do 50 problems of it, and then the next day you learn a different one and you do 50 problems of it, and the next day you do, and then you don't get your review in. So you need a mix of both, and that is really why I am a huge component of Rebekah's math, especially for the younger grades, because they do building blocks with a spiral review. Usually they will have that problem done at least, they will do that problem at least 20 times on the front sheet, and then on the back they will do it, and then they will review it. So they're very big on repetition and review. So it doesn't really matter what curriculum you use or how you build it or how you use it, because you know, curriculum is only a guide. You can add to it however you want. But make sure you're doing something that there's a lot of repetition to it that same day that you're learning something. Another thing that I really think will help with fractions that I've noticed is steps. If you can put down for kids, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. So, and usually if you have a story for your steps, that they can remember the steps. So through the years, for every single class I've had, I've kind of come up with different stories for each class. So really, whatever kid I'm teaching, I kind of try to figure out what they like to do. So if I'm doing, I had a group and we made fractions were babies. Look at the little babies. It's a little baby fraction. And what do little baby fractions have to do? What do babies have to be done? They have to change. Let's check if they need to be changed. And then what size diaper do you use just for reducing? So if you have 2 4s, can that number be changed? I think that number can be changed. What number can go into 2 and 4? What size diaper do we need? We need a size 2. Okay, so 2 goes into 2 1 time, 2 goes into 4 2 time, you get 1/2. So if you can make a story out of it, I have done, I wish I would have written some of them down because I can't remember, because the other day someone was talking to me, actually last night I was talking to one of my old students who I taught in 3rd grade, and now he's the music director at our church, and he was saying, do you remember the stories about the cars and the fractions? And I couldn't remember. But apparently I made up a story about cars and something, and he was telling me, and that's how he learned fractions. So the more creative you are with it, the more story, you know the child that you're teaching or learning, whatever they're into, see if you can relate that to something that they're doing. Another thing I sometimes notice in fractions is the child, the student, might not be ready to handle that many steps. Not every child matures as quickly as we want them to, okay? Just because they're at that 4th grade level age does not mean that they can handle it. And it's fine. So sometimes if you take it slow, going a little bit slower with them and not trying to force it, okay? Stop trying to make fetch happen, you know, like on Mean Girls. If we try, sometimes they're not ready to receive it. So we can do that, but make sure the next year you get it. And I guess my last tip that I really think is important for fractions, and Rebekah is really big on this, that you memorize your equivalent fractions. So the fact that they can relate that fractions, decimals, and percents are the same thing. It's writing the same thing but in a different language. Just like I can say hello in English, in Spanish, in French. So I could say hello in Spanish, it would be hola, and French would be bonjour. I think, I had to think about that one. The same thing is with math. It's the same thing 3 different ways. A fraction, a decimal, and a percent are the same thing. And so many times kids don't realize that. And Rebekah even has in their flashcards, which is amazing if you get their flashcards, but they'll have fraction, decimal, fraction, percent equivalent. So the flashcard will say 1/2 and it'll say 0.5. And then 0.5 equals what percent? 50%. If they can start relating those, and usually their list even includes 1/8, which is 0.125, 7/8, 0.825, those things will really help them. And believe it or not, those fractions and decimals and percents will help them later on. There are percent problems and fraction problems on the SATs and the ACTs. And believe it or not, that is the #1 thing I have kids come in when we're doing prep for SATs and ACTs. It's the basic math section. They can do all this hard math, but when they hit a fraction problem, they don't know how to do it. So I really think the 3 keys to doing fractions are: make sure you know those multiplication tables, make sure that you've done lots and lots of repetition, keeping the same type of problem several times in a row. And the 3rd is make sure you have written down steps for them. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. I like to have step books for them, because sometimes if we have it written down, they can see. Okay, and I like to put them on, and now I can't think what they're called. Bookmarks, like a bookmark piece of paper with 1, 2, 3. So if this, then you do this, 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 this. And if you can get them to consistently do the steps every time, it will make a huge difference in their life. Because sometimes we can't hold all the steps in, and you find that's the same way for algebra. We want them to be able to do these multi-step problems, and some of them just aren't able to. So it's the same thing with fractions. Fractions to me are the most important thing besides multiplication tables. Multiplication is #1, fractions are #2. The #1 and #2 thing that you will ever learn in math, because everything else is kind of based on that. There are tons, and we will put it in the blog, there are tons and tons and tons of manipulatives you can use. There are tons and tons and tons of games you can use. There are apps out there. There are a million different extra resources. But the key, I think, to using all those extra resources, and they're great, and some of them are amazing, is you can't outdo old-fashioned working the problem several times. And the key, if you're going to use an app or anything like that, make sure that it has something that's consistently being repetitive. And you know, a lot of times we'll follow our math book and we want to go on to the next skill, and they haven't got the skill before. So make sure that they have this skill that you're working on first before we build on the next one. Because that's what I find, a lot of kids get lost in it about halfway through because they didn't get what we were doing before. So, you know, addition, and then addition with two different denominators. And I will go in on Thursday into more specifics on different types. To me, the hardest thing for kids to get, if they can get adding fractions, they can fly through the rest of it. But just getting that understanding that fractions can be changed. You can have the same person, but it can be changed in different ways. So we will go over more specifics on Thursday about how to teach adding fractions. But if you're looking for, if you have a child that's really struggling with that, I would stop on fractions and go back and make sure that your multiplication tables are down very quickly. And we do want them to be able to say them super, super quickly. If you haven't gotten that skill, then you can't really go on to the next. It's kind of like a recipe. So I am not a baker. I don't believe in cooking. It's kind of against my religion. I'm really bad at it. It's not one of my fortes. But if you are baking bread, from what I understand, if you don't follow the steps and you don't let it rise, your bread will come out hard as a rock. So kind of like that with math. If you don't kind of go through the steps and make sure this step is completely done right, then you can't really progress on to the next thing. And fractions is one of those that I think are so important for us to solidify. Because if you get lost in fractions, you're going to get lost in decimals. You can usually figure out, but they'll really get lost in percents because they don't conceptually understand what it is. So Thursday, we will go over specifically how to teach addition and subtraction in fractions. And if you'd like, today in the blog on the website, we're going to add some other help, some great resources and tools and things that you can use for that. And if you have any questions or you'd like me to go over something specific on Thursday or a specific question about fractions, go ahead and put a comment here or comment on the blog, and I will make sure to address those. But hopefully, and if you can, like us, share our Facebook page with your friends. We would like to get to 5,000 followers, and we're almost there. So like us and share us, and hope you all have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday.